Now this location and this food plot brings back some great memories. Last year during muzzleloader season, shot a beautiful buck that we had on the property. I have lots of video and pictures of him. Just right over to my right here. He actually came down curling on a doe, pushed her back up and away from him, and then he was lip curling off to the side, off the food plot, and was able to shoot him at about 175 yards from the redneck behind me. Great memories. And really, when I'm out here right now and we're shooting videos and we're on these food plots, and it's big food plot planting time in the hunting industry right now, it brings up that there is a lot of bad information when it comes to planting food plots. You really need to beware and consider the source when it comes to taking recommendations that are online for what you should be planting within your food plots. And I'll give you an example. You know, last 2 weeks, in about 12 days, the last 12 days, 14 days, I was on 10 client properties in Michigan. That's my annual. April trip, I'm in Michigan. June, I'm in Michigan. August, I'm in Michigan. I'll see about 35 clients this year in Michigan. And COVID-19 wasn't going to stop me. I went to my clients. We actually had a waiting list in case someone were to cancel. And I went to all 10. All 10 kept it, and I appreciated that for them. And I appreciated being able to still work. But I came up on that trip, out of those 10 clients, I came up with 8 different food plot programs. And there's reasons for that, and we'll talk about that. But unfortunately, when you're looking online and you're looking at a recommendation, there's really no perspective of anything. But when it comes to a recommendation of taking something, what's the latest planting you should, when someone's giving a recommendation, oftentimes that one recommendation is way too specific. It's something that's worked for that person on that land, but it hasn't worked anywhere else that they know of because they haven't tried it anywhere else. It's only worked on their property, even if it did work. They don't have the perspective of actually leaving. And folks, when it comes to deer habitat, habitat management, herd management, food plot management, whatever it might be, you can't learn unless you leave. And what I mean by that is you learn more about deer hunting by hunting public land than just staying on your private land parcel. You learn more about hunting on public land if you hunt private land. It gives you perspective. It's no different than bass fishing down at Lake of the Ozarks, the Mississippi River, a small farm pond, the Great Lakes. How you fish for bass in each one of those locations is going to be a little bit different. Some of the concepts are the same. When it's a great day to bass fish in one location, it's probably a great day to bass fish in another location. The same can be said for golf and different courses that you play on around the country, hard meat, you know, depending on the difficulty level. The bottom line is you have to leave to learn. And unless you have the perspective of really analyzing food plots and food plot strategy or food plot plantings for a living, or you see it all the time, or you really immerse yourself into many different books and many different sources and consider all those sources, then you're probably going to fall victim easily to bad online food plot recommendations because they are so rampant, and most of the time it's coming from a single source, and really that person hasn't left their area. And I'll give you an example. You know, someone could manage 2,000 acres, 3,000 acres, 5,000 acres, and they can manage that all the time. They could have tons of experience planting food plots, how to plant them, what works on that property. But even consider that even on a property that large, again, unless you leave, you're not going to learn. You're only learning about that property, and you're learning in a fantasy land hunting property, regardless of the state, because that amount of acreage encompasses your mistakes, so you can even do a poor job and there could be some satisfactory results as far as what type of bucks are on the land. It's just too big to apply to anywhere else. So you have to leave to learn. It's very important when it comes to considering online food plot recommendation and the source of that recommendation. Something that is really important when it comes to considering food plots is, and the reason why I'll come up with 8 different recommendations for 10 clients just in Michigan, lower southern Michigan. I wasn't even up in northern areas. I actually stayed in Lapeer and at my hotel, Every client was within 2 hours, some were within a half hour. So they were all in southern lower Michigan, mostly in the southeast to southern areas. And even then, with similar property sizes, I had several properties under 60 acres. I had 3 properties under 40 acres. I only had 1 property that was over 100 acres, so all small properties. And Michigan's usually that way. I get into the bigger parcels in Wisconsin, Ohio, and then over into Minnesota, down into Iowa. A lot larger parcels, Illinois. So pretty small parcels. But even with similar parcel sizes, similar location, 8 different plans. And that's because you have to consider your resources for planting, what your planting tools are, what kind of crops your neighbors have. Do they have ag land or big woods? How many deer do you have? What kind of soil do you have? Really, is your food going to represent 5 feedings out of 5 in a 24-hour period, or is it going to represent 1 like this food plot does right here, or 1.5 like these food plots do right here out of 5 in 24 hours? Because they have the complement of good browse up in the woods, and they have the neighbor's ag fields. When you get up into northern settings with food plots, then on those food plots, they could represent 5 feedings out of 5. You're gonna need a lot more food, and you're gonna need to change your food to match the browsing pressure on the land. So often I hear people say, even to myself online and YouTube, what should I plant? These are the considerations. I receive at least a dozen of those a day to our email, to my private email. I don't even know how people get it, but they'll ask questions like that randomly, 4 or 5 paragraphs, and at the end, what do you think I should plant? Unfortunately, I don't have time to read the paragraphs. Diane tells me I'm just so busy doing everything else. I always have been. I'll tell you what, just a quick tip. If you have a habitat manager that's spending hours online a day, they're not a good habitat manager, because no one has that kind of time, whether you're whatever profession you're in or career, to spend hours online a day answering comments, because they're actually working. But bottom line is, there are so many different things, a number of deer, what's going on in the neighbors, your planting resources. Are you in a northern setting or a big wood setting or an ag setting? How many of those 5 feedings is that food plot going to represent? You have to figure all that all out first before you figure out what to plant. And so it's not that simple. The first hour to 2 hours of the day, we're talking about someone's land, and a large portion of that falls under food plots. And you have to have food plots on private land, or you're not going to be able to influence not only the neighborhood and the quality of the herd in the area, but you're not going to be able to influence the quality of your hunt. So that's why we're talking about food plots in the first place. But there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to what you should plant. And so I encourage you, watch the videos that I have when it comes to actually figuring out on your own what you should plant, because unless I'm with you for the day and really working with you, then it's going to be very difficult for me to hit the nail on the head when it comes to making the perfect recommendation for you. I talk a lot about that in my web classes that are coming out soon, and maybe even right now by the time you see this video, as far as what you should plant, why, and all those concepts that you can actually get to the end of the web class and say, yeah, this is what I should plant on my land. But so many things to consider just in those key features and really hard features of your land first, and even how you can plant those food plots. Your soil is so critical too. You know, what kind of soil you have is going to determine what kind of food plot seed that you plant. But it's not just that too. It's how much volume can you make. You know, we can grow corn in sand in really poor soil, but what kind of volume are we going to have, and is that even a fit for that land? That soil quality is going to tell you a lot about what you plant and what you should use in your rotations. We use the ultimate no-till buckwheat rotation, which you can see on these angled food plots here, helps us ward off and fight off erosion. It builds the soil. It's a smother crop, so it limits weeds, and we're not drying out the soil through excessive tilling and disking. So very important. But you really need to match your food plot program to the soil type. Obviously, I pull that out outside of those conditions of deer numbers, neighborly concerns, big woods, number of deer, overall deer, that type of thing, because you really need to really address your soil no matter what you do. And you always address your pH first, your pH levels, because if you don't, you can pour on the fertilizer, it's not going to be used by those plants if the pH is not appropriate. One way really to spot a very poor recommendation online is when someone is saying, hey, hit me up on Messenger. I'm going to tell you all about XYZ seed. I can get you a discount code, that kind of thing. What that means is they're probably on staff for that seed company, and they might even make a little bit of a kickback depending on what type of code they've generated. They probably know very little about seed. They just know that XYZ seed company is going to throw a little seed their way, and for that they'll tell everybody online and their friends and anybody that that's the best seed that you should buy. And if you see anything about discount code, that means cheap seed blend, probably a very bad source, and coming from someone that's looking at it more like, yeah, I'm going to get some money out of this deal. I recommend Northwood's whitetail seed. I could work with a lot of different seed companies, and I choose John, and I've known him as a friend for 8 years, and he's the only seed company I've ever worked with. And it's because I believe in the product. They have good product. There's no frills. There's no garbage that they're throwing in there and trying to sell you something that you don't need. It just sells itself. Any good quality seed sells itself, and it doesn't need to offer a discount code for you to buy. And you could extend that to anything, whether it's online consultations, habitat managers coming to your land, whatever. If someone's offering a discount, beware. That means they don't have customers. They don't have clients, whatever it might be, and that directly applies to the seed industry. Now, when someone does not have that perspective of looking at a lot of different parcels, they may have a really good seed blend that they're recommending for their property and that fits their property, but that probably doesn't fit for a lot of other properties. And we're looking at, even if you take out the soil concerns, the number of deer, what's going on in the neighbors, your planting resources, everything else, a lot of times that recommendation does not come with an understanding of what your deer need for the most critical months of the year. For example, soybeans, awesome food source if it doesn't create a doe factory, if you're trying to improve your deer numbers on your land, and if it's still around in November and December. But in a northern setting, in a northern meaning Ohio, could be, Illinois, now I'm not even talking about northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, upstate New York, or Vermont, or New Hampshire, like true northern areas. I'm talking Ohio. The deer really need a lot of food in November, December. So if what you're offering in one area does really well and hits that critical need because of a host of other factors, but it's gone before the season starts and your deer miss out on those October, November, December feedings, then you're really, really in poor shape. I had someone mention the other day that there's a new study out, or there's new studies that show that summer is the most critical time for food to be available. Well, no kidding. Deer have to grow. But as it relates to your local habitat, the local habitat has way more food than deer can even consume at that time. There are ag fields around here. The local habitat, in the UP of Michigan, the deer wouldn't hit the clover that much on the property because they had so much else available in April, May, June, July, August, before the weeds start dying. The limiting time of the local habitat and what's going on around you is the winter time. No kidding, deer need food, fawns need food, bucks growing their antlers need food during the summertime. That's one of those moments, that really, obviously, food is important during the summer, but as a priority of what you should do, there's already just so much food available during the summertime. Unfortunately, the critical time when deer need it the most is during the fall and winter months, and you need to have a recommendation that fits your land for the most food that you can have in October, November, and December. I talked to John Azogo a lot in the past, famed research biologist, and one of the things we talked about a lot was the critical amount of food that deer could eat before they go to the deer yards and when they return. Those are times that you cannot miss. During June, July, August, they have tons of food and they're living high on the hog. Obviously, that was an important period. Not arguing with that point of the article, but the article is misleading, or that study is misleading, because deer are dying in the wintertime because they do not have the food sources to create energy. They're not dying because of the snow and the deep snow and the cold and wind. They're dying because they don't have food. When you feed those deer in the same area, they actually hold their antlers 3 months longer, and they also maintain their body weights to a much higher degree. They're a lot healthier and they don't die because they're getting food and they're supplementally fed. Same winter, same area. One's in a supplementally fed area, one's not. It boils down to they have to have food during that critical period. And finally, that recommendation, man, it is so easy to fall victim to the latest and greatest seed blend that you should buy. The fads out there, the latest magic bean, it is so easy. So if you're scouring the internet and you're looking for, typing in words, what should I plant in my food plot? What's the best to plant in my food plot? You'll get about 15, 20 answers, and they're going to include a lot of the magic beans in the formula, and you're going to fall victim because there's going to be a big deer on the bag. It's going to tell you that if you plant this, you're going to have X, and you may, there's that slim chance, but oftentimes it's not a fit for your land. It's a poor recommendation. And overall, consider the source, consider the experience behind the source, consider the location and how it relates to your land, your deer numbers, your soil, what's going on in your neighbors, matches your resources for planting. Really pay attention, because it's so easy to fall victim to the latest and greatest magic bean. And I hope that you don't do that this year. I hope that you can follow the concepts in my food plot strategy playlist on YouTube, and really it points you in the right direction. Because if you ask down below in the comments, and I know there's going to be some smart Alex, we'll say it nicely, down there, they're going to say, what should I plant in my food plot? They're going to come up, and that's fine. But really, if you're asking down there, this is my land, this is what's going on, what should I plant? You know, that's a several hour conversation on site. I have to analyze what's been going on in the past, your resources, so many other things. It would be extremely inappropriate to recommend something on your land. And finally, that's what I'm going to end with, is that if someone is actually recommending what you should plant on your land without visiting your land, without discussing this with you for a couple hours in the morning, without discussing your resources, what you've had in the past, and they're making a recommendation for what you should plant, run like the wind. That's going to be a very poor recommendation. They haven't spent enough time with you. And this is someone that's spent enough time. I've analyzed over 1,000 food plots in 26 states since '05. It's what I do professionally for a living, is to help folks with their food plots. And I get paid to be right, and get paid to be right times 1,000 and running and still growing. You learn on every parcel. You have to leave your current parcel to find success. I've left my parcel a lot to go figure out what's happening. We're actually buying land in a home in Minnesota right now, and I can't wait to play that game over there and really narrow it down to the right fit on that land. I have some good ideas, like you can imagine. I hope you have some good ideas and you consider a lot of different resources and methods of planting. Consider a lot of different variables before you ever go to buy a seed and buy that bag of seed. Make sure it's a right fit for you, and really consider the source so that you're not falling victim to online bad food plot seed recommendations this season.